In February 1997, a husband vanished in Georgia. 11 days later, his car was found torched, his body hidden in the woods. And the person who set it all in motion wasn't a stranger. It was his wife. Welcome to True Crime Archives. Thank you to all my loyal subscribers for being here. If you're passionate about true crime, make sure to like, comment, and follow for more in-depth cases. Your support keeps these stories alive. Today's story takes us deep into betrayal, manipulation, and a shocking fight for redemption. This is the case of Kelly RENEE Gissendaner. Kelly was 28 years old in 1997. She had 3 children by 3 different men, and her personal life was nothing short of chaotic. Her marriage to Douglas Gissendaner had been rocky from the start. They married in 1989, divorced in 1993, then remarried in 1995, trying to give it another chance. Douglas was steady. He worked long hours in construction and welding, and he wanted to give his family stability. Friends described him as loyal, hardworking, and patient, maybe too patient. Kelly, on the other hand, wanted more. She was restless, volatile, and, by her own admission, bored with domestic life. By the mid-90s, she had taken up with a younger man, Gregory Owen, just 20 years old at the time. Co-workers noticed she didn't hide her feelings. She openly talked about being unhappy with Douglas, telling people she was in love with Greg. To her, Douglas represented responsibility, bills, and custody battles. Greg represented freedom. But divorce wasn't good enough for Kelly. She knew that if she left Douglas, she might lose the house, the car, the financial stability, maybe even her children. But if Douglas was dead, she'd keep everything and collect on his life insurance. The idea didn't start as a command. It began as a whisper, something Kelly mentioned to Greg late at night when no one else could hear. At first, he pushed back, calling it crazy. But Kelly didn't let it go. She brought it up again and again, until the idea of murder became less of a shock and more of an inevitability. By February 1997, Greg had given in. Whether it was out of love, pressure, or fear of losing her, he agreed to carry it out. Together, they started planning. In the days leading up to the attack, they stayed in constant contact. She called him 47 times and paged him 18 more. And on D-Day, they were spotted together near a row of payphones to finalize their plan before setting it in motion. On the night of February 7, 1997, Kelly drove Greg to her family's house. Before he got out, she handed him a nightstick and a large knife. Then, coldly, she drove away, heading to a nightclub to dance, drink, and build her alibi. Meanwhile, Greg waited in the dark. At around 10 p.m., Douglas returned home. The house was quiet. As he walked in, Greg stepped from the shadows, knife pressed to Douglas's throat. No shouting. No chance to fight back. Just an order, drive. The 2 men got into Douglas's car and headed into the woods of Gwinnett County. When Greg finally ordered him to stop, he marched Douglas into the trees and forced him to kneel. Greg hit him with the nightstick again and again. And after Douglas collapsed, he pulled a knife and stabbed him over and over in the back and neck until he stopped moving. Following Kelly's instructions, Greg stripped Douglas of his watch and wedding ring to make it look like a robbery. By the time Kelly left the nightclub, Douglas was already dying in the woods. She didn't call for help. Instead, she paged Greg with a coded message, then met him at the scene. Greg later testified that Kelly's only question was, "Is he dead?" When he said yes, she didn't cry. She didn't panic. She simply walked into the woods, shone a flashlight over Douglas's body, and looked down without a flicker of regret. Together, They doused Douglas's car in kerosene and set it ablaze. Then they drove back into town as if nothing had happened. And Kelly dropped Greg off at his house. There, he tossed the knife, the nightstick, his jeans, and Douglas's wedding band into the trash. But he missed one thing, which would come back to haunt him. Investigators later found the sweatpants he had worn that night, and the blood on the fabric matched both Douglas and Greg. The very next morning, Kelly picked up the phone and called the police. With a trembling voice, she reported Douglas missing. She claimed he had left around 7 p.m. the night before to help a friend fix a car, but never came back. Her act was convincing at first. She even cried on the phone, telling officers she was worried something had happened to him. But detectives quickly noticed inconsistencies. Why had Douglas, a family man known for his reliability, suddenly vanished? Why was Kelly so vague about where he went and with whom? There were no warning signs. Douglas had no debts, no enemies, and no reason to just walk away. Nothing made sense. And yet, Kelly stuck to her story. For 11 straight days, she told police she had no idea where her husband had gone. She painted a picture of a stable home, never mentioning the cracks in their marriage or the boyfriend she was hiding. But Kelly wasn't scrambling. She wasn't making it up as she went. She had been laying the groundwork long before detectives ever knocked on her door. So who was Kelly RENEE Gissendaner, and how did her life spiral to this point? Her story began in hardship. Born into poverty in rural Georgia, Kelly grew up in a family of cotton farmers where violence was as common as hunger. Abuse followed her from childhood into her teens, shaping her in ways that never fully healed. By high school, the chaos escalated. At 18, she became a mother to her first son, Brandon, after what she later described as a date gone wrong. At 19, she tried to create stability by marrying Jeff Banks, but that union barely survived 6 months. 2 years later, a blind date introduced her to Douglas Gissendaner. He was steady, dependable, and for Kelly, a chance at something different. They married that fall, welcomed their daughter Kayla, and began piecing together a future. But stability didn't last. Both lost jobs, bills piled up, and soon they were living under Kelly's mother's roof. Douglas joined the army to provide for them, and the family relocated to Germany. But while he served overseas, Kelly's loyalty fractured. She became pregnant by another man, a betrayal that shattered the marriage. In 1993, they divorced. Still, Douglas never turned his back on her. He remained close, and 2 years later, in 1995, they remarried, determined to try again. By 1996, they had bought a home in Auburn, Georgia, and for a brief moment, it looked like a real fresh start. Douglas raised all 3 of Kelly's children as his own, no questions asked. Their youngest, Dakota, would later say, "He was our dad. Always." But beneath the surface, trouble lingered. And just 36 hours after Douglas vanished, the illusion collapsed. Deep in the woods, a park ranger stumbled upon the blackened shell of a car. It was burned so completely that investigators could barely tell what make or model it had been. No glass, no plates, just twisted metal in the dirt. The only way to identify it was through the VIN stamped into the frame. When the results came back, the truth was undeniable. It was Douglas's car. But Douglas himself was gone. With no body and almost no leads, investigators zeroed in on the people closest to him. They questioned friends, neighbors, and co-workers. They pulled bank records and phone logs. And the more they dug, the less Kelly's story added up. Then, buried in the silence, they uncovered a detail she had tried to bury. During one of her many separations from Douglas, Kelly had been seeing another man, Gregory Owen. When detectives asked why she hadn't mentioned him, she brushed it off, claiming embarrassment. But the cracks were showing. Her story began to shift. And with that, suspicion moved squarely onto Kelly. Phone records revealed her constant communication with Greg in the days before the murder. Witnesses came forward, describing her complaints about Douglas and her obsession with Greg. Greg himself, when confronted, began to crack. And once police had the physical evidence, blood on his clothing, Kelly's phone calls, and his shifting story, the truth started to unravel. Gregory Owen was arrested first. Facing the death penalty, he made a deal: plead guilty, testify against Kelly, and in exchange, he'd receive life with the possibility of parole. Kelly, however, refused any plea deals. She insisted on going to trial. The courtroom was filled with tension as Greg described, in chilling detail, how Kelly had pressured him into the murder. Jurors heard about the dozens of phone calls, the nightclub alibi, and her cold visit to the crime scene. Prosecutors painted Kelly as manipulative, selfish, and remorseless. They said she had orchestrated every step, treating her husband's life as nothing more than an obstacle to her happiness. The defense tried to argue that Kelly wasn't present at the murder and therefore shouldn't face the death penalty. But the jury didn't buy it. In 1998, Kelly RENEE Gissendaner was convicted of murder and sentenced to death, the only woman on Georgia's death row at the time. Prison changed Kelly in ways no one expected. Behind bars, she earned a theology degree through a prison correspondence program. She became a source of guidance for other inmates, counseling them through grief, addiction, and despair. Fellow prisoners nicknamed themselves the Struggle Sisters, often crediting Kelly with saving their lives through spiritual mentorship. She also formed a close connection with the renowned German theologian Jürgen Moltmann, who exchanged letters with her for years, calling her transformation genuine. By the 2010s, Kelly had become a symbol of redemption behind bars. But for Douglas's family, that transformation didn't erase the horror of what she had done. They believed justice still had to be served. As her execution date approached, the pleas for mercy grew louder. Religious leaders, law professors, and activists all called on the state of Georgia to reconsider. Even Pope Francis sent a direct appeal, urging clemency on the grounds of mercy and redemption. Kelly's 3 children also begged for her life, saying they had already lost their father and couldn't bear to lose their mother too. But Douglas's family stood firm. To them, this wasn't about mercy. It was about justice. Douglas had begged for his life in the woods, and Kelly had given no mercy then. Why should she receive it now? On the night of September 29, 2015, Kelly ate her final meal: cheese dip with chips, Texas fajitas, and strawberry lemonade. As midnight approached, she was led into the execution chamber at Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison. Witnesses described her as emotional, weeping, and singing Amazing Grace as guards strapped her to the gurney. Her final words were directed at her children and Douglas's family. She apologized, asking forgiveness, and told her kids she loved them. At 12:21 a.m. on September 30, 2015, Kelly RENEE Gissendaner was pronounced dead by lethal injection. She was the first woman executed in Georgia in 70 years. Gregory Owen, the man who carried out the murder, was paroled in 2023 after serving more than 25 years. This case is a haunting reminder of how betrayal, greed, and manipulation can destroy lives. Kelly RENEE Gissendaner went from a suburban mother to the face of Georgia's death row, sparking debates about justice, mercy, and redemption that continue to this day. Thank you for watching.